devices work best when they don't work as intended, which is most of the time. Ekko, the boy who shattered time. Born with genius-level intellect, Ekko constructed simple machines before he could crawl. His parents, Inna and Wyeth, vowed to provide a good future for their son. Zon, with all its pollution and crime, would only stifle Ekko, whom they felt deserved the wealth and opportunities of Piltover. Throughout his youth, he watched his parents age beyond their years, toiling for too many hours under dangerous conditions in suffocating factories. They earned meager wages while greedy factory owners and sneering Piltover buyers profited immensely from their labor. It would all be worth it, they reasoned, if it meant their son could one day rise to the city above. Ekko saw things differently. Beyond Zan's flaws, he saw a dynamic place overflowing with energy and potential. Zonite's industry, resourcefulness, and resilience stirred a hotbed of pure innovation. They had built a thriving culture from catastrophe and flourished where others would have perished. That spirit captivated Ekko and spurred him to a youth of wild invention and innovation. He wasn't alone. He befriended scrappy orphans, inquisitive runaways, and eager upstarts. Zonites tended to eschew formal education in favor of apprenticeships, but these lost children of Zon looked to the labyrinthine streets to be their mentor. They wasted time in glorious, youthful fashion, foot races through the border markets, or daring climbs from the sump to the promenade. They ran wild and free, answering to no one. One night, on a solo trek into the rubble of a recently demolished laboratory, Ekko made an astonishing find. A shard of blue-green crystal that glittered with magical energy. Every child of Zon heard tales of Hextech, said to power weapons and heroes alike. Such a thing had the potential to change the world, and now he held a broken one. He scrambled to find more pieces, but the crunching footfalls of teched-up enforcers told him he wasn't the only one looking. Ekko barely escaped and returned to his home. He experimented madly with the crystal. During one less than scientific attempt, the gem exploded into a vortex of shimmering dust, triggering eddies of temporal distortion. Ekko opened his eyes to see several splintered realities and several Ekko versions of himself, staring back in sheer panic amid the fractured continua. He'd really done it this time. After some tense coordination between Ekko and his paradoxes, they managed to contain and repair the hole he had torn in the fabric of reality. Eventually, he harnessed the shattered crystal's temporal powers into a device that would allow him to manipulate small increments of time, at least in theory. On his name day, his friends badgered him into climbing the ancient clock tower, known as Old Hungry. So Ekko brought the untested device along with him. The lost children climbed, stopping occasionally to paint an obscene caricature or two of prominent Pilties. They were near the top when a handhold gave way, sending one of Ekko's friends tumbling to certain doom. Instinctively, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before, Ekko activated his device. The world shattered around him, and he was wrenched backward through swirling particles of was back, watching his friend reach again for the same rotting plank. The plank broke, the boy fell, but Ekko was ready this time, diving to the edge and grabbing him by the shirt. Ekko tried to swing him to safety, but his friend became caught in the tower's clockwork gears, and stop, rewind. Several attempts later, Ekko finally saved his friend's life. But to his crew, Ekko's supernatural reflexes had saved their friend before anyone even realized the danger. He told them about the crystal and made them swear to secrecy. Instead, they dared each other to new heights of foolishness, knowing Ekko had the means to pluck them out of danger. With each trial and so much error, the time-warping device, which Ekko dubbed the Zero Drive, grew more and more stable. The only limit was how many do-overs his body could take before exhaustion set in. Ekko's time-bending antics have made him a person of interest to some of Zon and Piltover's most inventive, most powerful, and most dangerous individuals. But his only interest is in his friends, his family, and his city. He dreams of the day when his hometown rises up to dwarf the so-called City of Progress, when Piltover's golden veneer will be overshadowed by the towering ingenuity and relentless spunk of a Zon born not from generations of privilege, but from sheer daring. He may not have a plan yet, but he's got all the time in the world. After all, if Ekko's Z-Drive can change the past, how hard can it be to change the future? Lullaby. It had been a week-long sort of day. For Ekko, this was both literal and metaphorical. Everything went wrong, and it took forever to put it back just right. First, Arjuna had nearly gotten himself killed trying to climb Old Hungry. The younger boy wanted so desperately to be like Ekko that he vaulted up the side of the clockwork tower at the heart of this sump before any of their friends could stop him. It was the first tricky jump that nearly did the kid in. Good thing Ekko had triggered his Z-Drive. 18 times he heard the blood-curdling scream of the boy falling to his death before he figured out how and where to arrest the fall and save his life. Then, while pillaging a scrap heap with ties to Clan Pharos for bits of tech, a particularly aggressive gang of vigil-nauts surrounded him. Big ones too, covered in augments that made the ugly even uglier. Ekko was surprised at their speed, but less surprised at how they shot to kill. Pilties and their backup didn't care about the lives of sump snipes like him. Good thing the Z-Drive existed to get him out of seemingly inescapable encounters like that one. After a few dozen rewinds, he changed tack and pulled out his latest toy, the Flash Binder. It was meant to explode in a dazzling flash and pull anything not bolted down in toward its center. But the Flash Binder didn't work. Well, at least not as intended. It exploded, and that's when things got interesting. Unlike most of Ekko's inventions that exploded, the blue-hot magical detonation froze in mid-blast. Columns of billowing blue energy fanned out from the epicenter. Bits of the discus shrapnel twisted at a snail's pace, along what, at normal explosion velocity, would be a deadly trajectory. Even the spherical blinding flash itself was was frozen in space. And then it got even more interesting. The explosion imploded, reforming itself into the palm-sized flash binder, and rewound back toward Ekko, landing square in his palm, as cold as the wind. Cool, Ekko thought. He rewound the moment so he could throw it at the Vigil Knots a few more times. For science, of course. When Ekko finally got home, his body was tired, but his mind was alert. The apartment was functional, the furniture sparse and with little flourish. Ekko's room was a little curtained-off nook filled with discarded books, bits of scavenged technology, and hiding spots for the seed drive and flash binder. Today was one of the rare days both his parents would be home early, and he had something to tell them. Mom, Dad. He practiced to his reflection, which stared back at him from the seed drive's shiny cylindrical surface. I'm not going to apply to any of the Upside clans or a snooty buildy school. I'm staying here with you and my friends. I'll never turn my back on Zon. The words were filled with the confidence that comes with being alone in an empty apartment, with only walls and reflections to respond. And their response was silence. He heard the jingle of the keys, muffled by the front door. Without a second to spare, Ekko tucked his C drive under the table and draped a black cloth over it. He didn't want them worrying about his escapades with an unstable Hex-Tech time manipulation device. The door opened, and Ekko's parents returned for the first time that night. They looked like strangers to their own son, their jobs aging them even more in the weeks since he'd seen them last together. Their routine was predictable. They'd shuffle home, supply a meager meal purchased with the day's wages, save the rest of the money for taxes and bribes, then fall asleep in their chairs, chins resting on chests, until Ekko removed their work boots and helped them into their beds. The pegs under their eyes carried enough weight to pull their heads down. Tucked under his mother's arm was a small paper-wrapped bundle, bound at the ends with twine. "Hello, my little genius." His mother expended energy she couldn't afford in an attempt to make the words come alive. Yet her expression in that moment of lightness, when she saw her son sitting at the table, waiting, was something no one could fake. "Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad." The three of them hadn't sat at a table as a family in such a long time. He quietly chided himself for not saying something substantial. His father beamed with pride. Then he mock-scowled as he brushed his fingers through his son's mohawk. Ekko struggled to remember a time when his father didn't look so old, before the prematurely thinning hair and the deep wrinkles in his brow. "I thought I told you to cut that hair," his father said. "It'll make you stand out in the Piltover academies too much. The factory wood's the only place you can look like that. They'll take anyone, and you are not anyone. How are your applications coming?" This was the moment Ekko felt the words he'd practiced swimming up to his mother filled that empty moment before Ekko could. "We have a treat for you." She set the brown parcel down on the table. They pulled their chairs close to watch as Ekko reached over and untied the knotted twine, straightened both strings, and laid them next to him. He unraveled the butcher paper without a single rip. In the center lay a small loaf of fragrant sweetbread, its crust glazed with honey and candied nuts. The cake was from Evelynn. She made the finest pastries in all of Zon, and charged a pretty penny for them too. Ekko and his friends often pilfered her desserts from the rich folk who paid the hefty price without even a tiny hesitation. Ekko's head shot up to see his parents' reaction. Their eyes were beaming. "This is too much," he said. "We need meat and real supper, not sweets." "We would never forget your name day," his father said with a chuckle. "Looks like you did, though." Ekko had completely lost track of what day it really was. Still, the gift was too extravagant, especially since he was about to shatter their hopes for him. Guilt rose in his throat. "The landlord'll have our heads if we're late with rent again. Let us worry about that. You deserve something nice," his mother said. "Go on, you can have cake for dinner once a year." "What are you going to eat?" "I'm not hungry," she said. "I ate at work," his father lied. "Cheese and meats from Piltover. Real nice stuff." They watched Ekko take a tiny bite of the cake. It was sweet and buttery, and the crumbs stuck to his fingers. It was so rich, the taste stuck to his tongue. Ekko went to divide the cake into 3 pieces, but his mother shook her head. Her soft voice hummed the name day song's playful melody, and he knew they wouldn't partake. It was his parents' gift to him. His father would have joined in singing the name day song if he hadn't already fallen asleep, slumped in his chair, chin dropping to his chest. Ekko glanced over to his mother. Her eyes fluttered closed as the melody was swallowed by her own encroaching slumber. One future Ekko briefly considered was the factory wood life and barely living wages for some other city's benefit, for someone else's glory. He couldn't stomach the thought. He remembered fragments of conversations, snippets heard through the filter of infant ears, of his parents' whispered dreams of inventions and entrance to the clans, ideas they hoped would change the world and contribute to a future unwritten by the birth of their son. Ekko knew they saw him as their only hope, but he loved life in Zaun. If he did as they wished, who would take care of them or his friends? He couldn't dash their dreams. Not tonight, on his name day. Maybe tomorrow. Ekko didn't finish his cake beyond the first bite. Instead, he primed his seed drive. His home shattered into swirling eddies of colored dust. The thrum of the everyday fell to absolute silence. The moments splintered and encircled him in a vortex of light. When the fragments of the future reassembled into the past, Ekko's parents were coming home for the second time that night. It would be followed by a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth. and so on. Each time he went back, Ekko didn't change a single thing. The light in his mother's eyes, his father's proud smile as he nodded off. But Ekko fought the edges of sleep to hold on to those stolen moments forever, until finally he let his mother's soft voice and the warmth of their little apartment lull him to sleep. It had been a week-long sort of day. What are you doing tonight? How about we get together and unlock that vast well of torment inside you? Evelynn, agony's embrace. Within the dark seams of Runeterra, the demon Evelynn searches for her next victim. She lures in prey with the voluptuous facade of a human female. But once a person succumbs to her charms, Evelynn's true form is unleashed. She then subjects her victim to unspeakable torment, gratifying herself with their pain. To the demon, these liaisons are innocent flings. To the rest of Runeterra, they are ghoulish tales of lust gone awry, and horrific reminders of the cost of wanton desire. Evelynn was not always a skilled huntress. She began eons ago as something primordial, shapeless, and barely sentient. This nascent wisp of shadow existed, numb and unroused by any stimulation, for centuries. It might have remained so had the world not been upended by conflict. The Rune Wars, as they would come to be known, brought an era of mass suffering the world had never known. As people across Runeterra began to experience a vast array of pain, anguish, and loss, the shadow stirred. The nothingness it had known for so long had been replaced by the manic vibrations of an agonized world. The creature quivered with excitement. As the Rune Wars escalated, the world's torment grew so intense that the shadow felt as if it might burst. It drank in all of Runeterra's pain, which it experienced as boundless pleasure. The sensation nourished the creature, and over time it transformed into something more. It became a demon, a ravenous spiritual parasite that fed on the basest of human emotions. When the wars finally ended, the world's suffering waned, and the demon found itself growing desperate. The only pleasure it had ever known was born of other creatures' misery. Without their pain, it felt nothing, just as it had in its earliest days. If the world would not provide the suffering the demon needed to thrive, it would have to make its own. It needed to inflict pain on other beings so that it could experience that elation again. At first, catching prey was a challenge for the demon. It could move undetected in its shadow form, but to touch a human, the creature needed to manifest as something tangible. It made several attempts to fashion a physical body from its shadow flesh, but each result was more monstrous than the last, scaring off her prey. The demon realized it needed a shape that was pleasing to humans, one that would not only lure them right into its claws, but would offer them ecstasy born of their own desires, so that their pain would be that much sweeter. From the shadows, it began to study those it sought to prey upon. It tailored its flesh to their liking, learned to say what they wanted to hear, and to walk in a manner they found so small, and they always expire too soon. Their pain too fleeting to give her anything more than tiny morsels of pleasure is just enough to tide her over to the next feeding. She yearns for the day she can plunge the world into utter chaos, and she can return to an existence of pure, rapturous ecstasy. The tallest daisy. Evelynn slinked through the teeming streets, the shadows of her body blending seamlessly with the night. Her eyes glinted within the gloom, though only the keenest observer would have noticed. Drunks, sailors, and harlots chatted in a nearby thoroughfare, blissfully unaware they were being watched by a demon in the dark. The demon, on the other hand, saw them all with perfect clarity, and judged them with the most discerning eye. Evelynn's gaze settled on a man lying in the gutter, a bottle of beet wine dangling from his hands. Ordinarily, the demon wouldn't give a second thought to someone in his condition, but she had not fed in days, and she found herself desperate enough to consider the man, if only for a moment. It would be so easy. All she needed was to lure him to one of the numerous alleys far from the glow of the street lamps. The thought perished as she watched a cockroach scurry across the drunk's face. This was a man too inebriated to feel. His arousal would be vague and muted, with none of the urgent attraction she loved to see in her victims before she brought them low. She might even flay an entire arm before he mustered a scream. And that was the problem. Over the course of countless feedings, Evelynn had learned everything about her palate. She preferred, no, needed, her victims to feel every prick, every bite, every bit of flesh she peeled away with her claws. A man in this condition would be dull and unfulfilling, scarcely worth her time. She dismissed the drunk and continued down the muddy promenade, past the windows of a dank, candlelit tavern. A fat, belching woman threw open its door and stumbled out into the night, grasping a half-eaten turkey leg. For a moment, Evelynn considered the woman, how she might woo her into an embrace, and then into the unspeakable hell that would follow. The demon watched as the woman wolfed down the rest of the meat, never tasting it. There was something deep inside her, a melancholy that would taint the experience. Evelynn preferred inflicting the pain herself. The demon moved on, gliding through the shadows of the town, over two more drunks, past a beggar asking for alms, between a couple in the midst of an argument. Evelynn found them all completely unappealing. Hurting them would be like plucking a flower that had already wilted. She preferred her daisies tall and healthy, for those were the most satisfying to cut down. A dreadful thought overtook her. Perhaps she'd made a mistake choosing this wretched backwater as her hunting ground. Perhaps at any moment the thrill from her last victim might wear off, leaving only the nothingness, that utterly empty space inside her where feelings should be. And then she saw him. The gentleman was positively beaming as he exited one of the high-end pubs. He was dapper without being flashy, and he hummed a jaunty tune to himself as he set off down the street with a bouquet of flowers his arm. The 2 lashes on Evelyn's back writhed with excitement. Even from a distance, she sensed this man was completely content in his own skin. She dashed after the gentleman, taking great care not to lose track of her prey or to alert him to her presence. He walked for nearly half an hour before finally turning up a long walkway toward a modestly sized cut-stone manor. At the end of the path, the man stepped through the heavy oak door to his home. Evelynn held her unblinking gaze on the windows of the man's house as they lit one by one with warm candlelight. A slender, austere woman in a high-necked evening gown entered and greeted the man with a welcoming embrace. She feigned a slight surprise at the flowers he had brought before placing them in a clean vase, right next to an old bouquet. The demon's interest grew. A moment later, 2 children, scarcely out of diapers, ran into the room and threw their arms around the man's legs, their wide grins sparkling with tiny teeth. Though the scene played like the epitome of domestic bliss, Evelynn knew what she would find if she probed just a little deeper. She waited patiently, watching the candles go out one by one, until only the parlor remained lit. The man was alone, settling into a reading chair to draw on his pipe. Evelynn crept out of the shadows, her dark, wispy limbs giving way to warm flesh. Her demonic lashes disappeared behind her back, revealing a shapely female form with curves too generous for any eye to ignore. Her hips waggled softly as she sauntered across the lawn to the window. She was nearly arm's length from the glass when she saw the man bolt upright from his chair at the sight of her, his pipe nearly falling from his mouth. Evelynn beckoned with a single finger, motioning for the man to join her outside. The man crept to the front door and opened it tentatively, curious to investigate the strange beauty lurking outside his window. He approached her on the lawn with great apprehension and greater anticipation. "Who are you?" he asked timidly. "I'm whatever you want me to be," assured the demon. As Evelynn locked eyes with the man, she plumbed the depths of his soul and found exactly what she was looking for. That tiny lesion of discontent that festered within even the happiest person. There it is, she thought. All that he wants and cannot have. My family, the man said, unable to finish his thought. The demon leaned close. "Shh, it's okay," she whispered in the man's ear. "I know what you want and the guilt you feel for wanting it. Let it go." She pulled back to find the man hopelessly captivated. "Can I have you?" he asked, ashamed of his brazenness, but overcome by a strange desire to take her right there on the lawn. "Of course, honey. That's why I'm here," said the demon. He touched her face with the tips of his fingers, caressing her cheek. She held his hand firmly to her skin and released a soft, sultry chuckle. This sweet, tender, happy man would be hers tonight. He had so much pain to give, and she would take it all. From behind them, the the shuffling of slippered feet sounded from the open doorway of the house. "Is everything okay, love?" asked the man's wife. "Everything's going to be wonderful, my darling," the demon answered for the dumbstruck man. The deal had become even sweeter, and the prospects more enticing. There was one daisy in full flower